It's often said that the United States of America has problems with gun violence, with high rates of gun homicide and suicide. Mass shootings seem fairly common. Liberals call for what I see as sensible gun controls. Conservatives fire back, maybe citing the Constitution or accusing the left of trying to politicise the latest acts of brutality and bloodshed. Obviously we have stricter gun controls here in the United Kingdom, and clearly there is less gun violence here. Places I visited this year, Hong Kong and Japan, gun violence very, very rare. Yeah. So by comparison to many European and Asian countries, the United States does have a gun problem and has had a problem for a long time. It looks like a very touchy subject for many Americans, the whole gun thing. But despite what some might believe, the US is not the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, when it comes to gun-related violence. Rolling through some statistics collected from the 21st century, spanning more than a decade, almost up to the present. Not a comprehensive list of countries, but yeah, the list I was just looking at, it gave some insight into the bigger picture. That picture, what was jumping off the page for me is the gun violence, the homicide rates recorded at one time or another in places like Brazil, Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Panama, Venezuela, Mexico, and other Central and South American states. It makes for grim reading. Yeah. Just going back to the US for a second, if you look at the private citizen firearm ownership in the USA, yeah, pretty scary stuff. The US is number one in private gun ownership compared to 178 other countries, I believe. I've heard some estimates as high as almost half of the privately owned guns in the world are in the United States. Damn. It seems like an obsession, like a cultural obsession. Yeah. Going back to South America, according to the BBC, according to a BBC article I read back in the spring, I think, gun killings in Brazil had risen to the highest levels in 35 years. I think this BBC article was based on a study in 2012 done by both the UN and the Brazilian government. Yeah, and this study says that roughly 42,000 people were shot and killed in Brazil in 2012, almost all of these killings being murders. The Wild West is alive and well, is it not? CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, independent think tank, membership organisation, CFR.org, their website, and they're here on YouTube. On their website, I was reading earlier on, Policy Innovation Memorandum number 36, a strategy to reduce gun trafficking and violence in the Americas. And this piece was released 2.5 years ago. The first line, quote, The flow of high-powered weaponry from the United States to Latin America and the Caribbean exacerbates soaring rates of gun-related violence in the region and undermines US influence in the Western Hemisphere, end quote. Yeah. Go do some research on the Meridia Initiative, signed into law in 2008. Security cooperation between the US and Mexico and Central American countries, with the stated aim of combating organised crime. For years now, decades even, there's been an arms race going on between rival cartels in the area. Civilian firearms from the United States supplies criminal organizations in Central America with high-powered weaponry, the weaponry they crave, and gun violence. Criminal gangs continue to terrorize and destroy communities in the region. The Wall Street Journal published a piece in 2014 going over a UN study, possibly the same one I referred to earlier, from 2012. The title of the article in the Wall Street Journal, by David Lunau, probably pronounced that wrong, anyway, the title, Latin America is the world's most violent region. Area accounts for nearly 1 in 3 global homicides. And there's a graph showing homicide rates per 100,000 people in 2012. It puts Honduras on top, followed by Venezuela, Belize, El Salvador, and Guatemala. The report came from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Cycles of poverty and political corruption surely play their part in Latin America's violence-related problems. Organised crime and weak law enforcement are factors also. Chile seems to do a lot better than many other South American and Central American countries by several measures. So, whatever they're doing right. But the arms trade is a booming business, not just in the Americas, but globally.